The time is about 1400 BC. The Israelites are struggling with their long and arduous trek to the Promised Land. Ahead, blocking their path, is the well-fortified city of Jericho. The Israelites were neither equipped nor trained to mount a battle against such a massive adversary. According to the Bible, this famous battle will be won with the sounding of a trumpet.
All the shouting and trumpet blowing in the world will not cause 15-foot thick walls to collapse.
Stories like the walls of Jericho falling down at the blast of a trumpet are reasons people don't believe everything in the Bible.
We have a great deal of evidence, scientific evidence, that the walls of Jericho have collapsed by an earthquake, just as described by the Bible.
While Jericho is one of the oldest cities in the world, there's nothing on the site that relates it to the story of Joshua's conquest.
Even though Jericho is one of the oldest cities in the world, with many towns built one on the other, we can very precisely date the city that was destroyed by the Israelites as described in the Bible.
For 40 years, Moses led his people through the desert wilderness of the Sinai Peninsula, preparing them for the day they would enter Canaan, the Promised Land. It was now up to Joshua to enter and possess the Promised Land. But a great walled city named Jericho, which had already been there for thousands of years, stood between Joshua's success or failure at conquering Canaan for the Israelites. Joshua had none of the war machines capable of destroying or even penetrating a walled fortress. Only a miracle sent by God would do the job. And that miracle, according to the Bible, caused the walls of Jericho to come tumbling down with the sounding trumpets. Fact or fiction? Did it really happen? Biblical scholars believe that Joshua created the first Israelite army. Just as Moses had taken the slaves of Egypt and molded them into one people, so had Joshua made an army of fighting men out of farmers, potters, and tradesmen. Joshua's true name among his tribe of Ephraim was Hosea. Moses called him Joshua. The first test of the Israelite men-at-arms was not long in coming, for they were passing through barbarous and hostile country.
Again! Again attack into the Amalekite center! Attack! In the name of Moses! In the name of Israel! In the name of God! Attack!
At Amalek, the green troops of Joshua were bloodied. It's written that while Moses kept his arms raised, they were victorious. When he dropped his arms, the fighting began to fail. Then Moses called for support to keep his arms upraised the whole day, and the new fighting force under Joshua gained its first victory. There is little doubt that Joshua also served as Moses' personal bodyguard. When the prophet went up the mountain to talk to God, Joshua alone accompanied him. There were many small encounters with raiders, bandits, and quarrelsome tribes. The Bible only mentions two more major battles while Israel was still in the wilderness. Heshbon, where the Amorites were severely defeated, and Bashan, where the cities and arrogant king were humiliated and crushed. And when the greatest of all prophets knew his time had come, he anointed Joshua his successor and put the mantle of leadership upon him. According to the book of Joshua, the Jordan River stopped flowing to allow the Israelites to cross into Canaan so that Joshua could ready his attack on Jericho.
The idea that the Jordan River stopped flowing to let Joshua and the Israelites cross on dry land is one reason to question the entire book of Joshua.
Normally, the Jordan River flows too swiftly to be crossed by foot. But often after earthquakes, the river is dammed, sometimes up to a couple of days, like it happened in 1906. I'm convinced that the drying up of the Jordan River during Joshua's conquest was similarly a result of an earthquake.
The Bible tells us that the city of Jericho had to be destroyed. It was a pagan fortress of depravity, an abomination in the eyes of God, and a locked gate to the promised land. After Joshua had crossed the river, he sent spies into the city, whose report may have caused great concern among Joshua's generals. Jericho was well fortified, well stocked with grain from the harvest, and there was a natural spring in the middle of the city. Jericho could withstand a very long siege.
We put ourselves into a terrible position. Now the river is at our back. We have all the armed cities of Canaan before us.
My counselors believe we should move south. Start with a smaller campaign.
If Joshua insists on this madness, we will waste the flower of our army on those walls. Better to attack a less formidable position until we have time to build up our strength.
Good news. We have good news, worthy generals. The Amorite bastion is fat and ripe for an attack.
When will that be, General?
By the first of the new moon, brave Zebulon.
That is a mere 7 days away.
God made the entire universe in less than that. 7 days, and Jericho will be ours.
Have you some news from the city? Would they give in without a fight? Are they asking covenant of us?
They scorn us and our presence. They're as strong and well supplied as we had imagined. They could withstand a siege of years.
Then how do we make this powerful pagan fortress ours? Surely not by throwing ourselves against those high and remorseless walls.
With faith, my able and worried commanders, God has spoken to me. And I will tell you the plans, for we begin at the break of dawn.
By your leave, mighty Joshua, it will take weeks for us to strengthen our army.
This victory will not come by the strength of our arms, but by the power of God. That is why there is to be no prize-taking, no looting, not one single armor of grain.
No prizes, no rewards. If the city is full of grain, it would feed our people for months.
Nothing, generals, is to be taken from the city. Our only purpose here is to destroy this abomination with the sword and with fire.
Perhaps, great Joshua, we might know how the Lord would have us do his bidding.
The ark will be called forth and placed in the center of the march. 7 priests with 7 trumpets will precede it. Each day, we will go forth in battle array and march around the walls once. No sound will come from the ranks. Only the blare of the trumpets will be heard.
To the Israelites, undoubtedly the ark was their most sacred religious object, for it served as the footstool of the true God, and his divine presence was once visible there. Within the Ark of the Covenant were contained the 2 tablets upon which were written the 10 Commandments, Aaron's rod that budded, and a pot of manna that once fed the Israelites during their long wilderness journey.
The Israelites believed that the Ark of the Covenant was responsible to allow them to walk across the Jordan River when it was miraculously dried up. The Ark of the Covenant was used when they surrounded the city of Jericho 7 times. The entire city fell into the ground, as archaeologists have verified. The Ark was used in battle after battle, and won victory after victory for the Israelites.
For 500 years, the Ark was the most precious and sacred object in the world. The children of Israel followed it into battle and into the promised land. As long as the people could see the ark, they knew God walked among them. For 6 days, the line of march went silently around the great walls, except for the sounding of the trumpets by the priests. Then, on the 7th day, the host made 6 courses around the wall in complete silence. But at the end of the 7th march, now we've seen the biblical story of the destruction of Jericho's walls. Is it possible that science can shed any light on the mystery of how it might have happened? And can they tell us when it happened by astronomical dating?
Ancient people did not have clocks and calendars as we have today. They looked at the sky to tell time. Any date that was given was based on the phases of the moon or the sun or a combination of both. Astronomy is an exact science. Because of what we know about astronomy today, we can, with computers, go back and examine what these people said and duplicate it in the sky on a computer so that we can precisely date events. Using the references in the Bible, we've been able to determine that the walls of Jericho fell down on April the 9th, 1421 BC. This would make the first circle around Jericho on April the 3rd of the same year. We can determine this by a solar eclipse that took place on Joshua's long day 10 days later. As we look at the screen, we notice that at 12 noon, over that particular area, the sun was being eclipsed by the moon, as you can see.
We have a great deal of evidence, scientific evidence, that the walls of Jericho have collapsed by an earthquake, just the way described in the Bible. The best evidence are the skeletons that were uncovered in Jericho, 1400 BC, which were obviously destroyed by a collapsed wall.
For many years, scholars thought that the story of Jericho was a mythical legend. When the archaeological evidence is properly interpreted, however, we find it agrees with the Bible in an amazing way. Jericho was a very strongly defended city. It had 2 mud brick walls surrounding it. The archaeological evidence indicates that those mud brick walls collapsed, as described in the Bible, and probably that was due to earthquake. Remnants of that wall are still there today. In fact, I have one of the mud bricks right here. It's about 3,400 years old. Now, if you'll look at this archaeological reconstruction with me, I'll show you how that happened. The city was surrounded by an outer stone revetment wall about 12 feet high. On top of that was a mud brick wall about 18 feet high. This is what the Israelites faced as they marched around the city for 7 days, according to the biblical account. Behind those walls was a massive earthen embankment that surrounded the entire city. At the crest of that embankment was yet another mud brick wall about 18 feet high. On this embankment, there were houses constructed. As the archaeologists excavated within the city, they found abundant evidence that there was earthquake activity at the time the city met its end. When they excavated at the base of this outer stone revetment wall, they found piles of collapsed mud bricks, as we see here in the drawing. Now, even though these mud brick walls collapsed and fell, the stone wall, the 12-foot-high stone wall, is still there today. How did the Israelites get over that? Well, the way that the mud bricks fell, they formed a ramp so that the Israelites could merely go up over that ramp and into the city and set it ablaze. This gave ample evidence that the biblical account was entirely correct. In the Bible, we're told that the walls fell flat. Within the city, they found great quantity of grain. It was very evident that the end came just after harvest time. Again, this agrees with the biblical story. It's very unusual to find large amounts of grain in an ancient site. Here at Jericho, they found in almost every building great jars full of grain. Usually that would have been plundered because it was very valuable. The Bible tells us, however, that the Israelites were forbidden to plunder the city, that it was to be offered up to God. The fact that there was a lot of grain there indicates that there was a very short siege of the city. The Bible says the siege lasted but 7 days. All of the details that the archaeologists have found agree precisely with the biblical narrative.
As we said at the start, the book of Joshua is very controversial. What is the weight of the evidence offered? In this case, while the doubts are mighty and challenging, there's no evidence at all that the occurrences described in the book of Joshua did not happen. The skeptics only raise doubts whether these things did happen. On the other side, the strongest scientific, archaeological, and historical evidence has demonstrated that everything the Bible stated could have happened, and probably did, just as the Bible describes this event. There's more to this story than the great city walls of Jericho tumbling down. It's an account of how Joshua's unquestioning obedience to God brought victory, even though his counselors attempted to sway him toward military options. In today's modern world, does obedience to God's laws still impact our lives and change the course of nations? Something to think about.